Hey y'all. So in the prior releases, I've done these little behind the scenes sharing a lot of the why we did what we did, what the thought process was, some of the challenges along the way. And y'all really seem to like these. In fact, more so than the product releases. So absolutely going to do that here. As this was the biggest release since launch. And really this was based on everything that we've learned about how agents are using the platform. The first, which is obvious as I say it, agents don't really think about markets. They think about properties. They think about listings. You're going to a listing presentation, you want to have a market report. You're going to show a buyer a property, you want to have a market report. You're talking to a prior client about their current property, you want a market report. And then the next thing is, well, what market does it exist in? And prior to this, you had to then go and kind of start to search or maybe like kind of create a market. And with that realization that no, you're really thinking about a property, that's where the entire just development of this initiative came from. Be able to search, see that market. Now, no one likes being overwhelmed with choices, so I need to be able to recommend a market. In so doing, needed to have some way of getting rid of the noise. So put a line in the sand saying that any default market has to have at least 30 closings in the last year. If not, there wasn't enough information for it to be meaningful. With that, was then able to start going about recommending a market. And then, of course, being able to, though, look through all the different markets that it exists in. That was the first big thing that I learned. The second thing was agents love production volume. You know, certainly if you're going into a competitive listing, speaking to how well you do in that market is valuable. And then, you know, we're all a bit competitive. We like to know how we're doing compared to other agents, etc. Seeing the amount of adoption around agent production volume, seeing the way that markets were being used and the motivations behind that, it was like, there's really three core components here. There are the markets, that's that core, that core piece, but there's also listings as a vehicle to discover markets, an opportunity to perhaps build a lot more in the future. And then there was agents, making it easy to get at all of them. And so brought that all up into the left-hand screen so that you could easily click from one to the next. Continuing to land on a very easy page where you can just search for whatever you're looking for. And then, of course, maintain the existing functionality, being able to generate those PDF market reports and social media. And knowing that that's what needed to be built was faced with a bit of dilemma. Because what I've also learned since launch is the other thing that people really love about Agent Intel is how easy it is to use. That it's not cluttered. You don't have to think like a statistician working your way through tables. It's easy to navigate. It's intuitive. And this is where a lot of products often fall down, is that even if they start there, well, you need to build this feature, you need to build that feature, and all of a sudden it feels tacked on, cluttered, and it's hard to navigate. So if we were going to add these new features, we also needed to invest in making the UI and UX easier. If you're going to make it more complicated, you got to make it easier, and then you'll be, if you do it right, hopefully it won't be any more complicated than it was before, and maybe if you're lucky, it's even easier. Doing that required adding a whole lot of visual consistency and defining a whole lot of things that wasn't there before. So for instance, you'll notice that there are these footers: add listing, add market. If you go to markets, it's add markets. And when you're in a market, you'll see that it's generate report, start post. If you're going to take an action that's going to be making something, it's going to be down at the bottom. And so wherever you are in the app, if you're going to be creating something, making something, go down to the bottom. And that way it will become second nature that, oh, I got to create a thing or do a thing. You go down to the bottom for that. Additionally, when it comes to editing something, changing something, well, up here, this was just a dial before. What you're doing is updating the filters, putting that visual prompt in place of, one, calling it filters, but two, anytime where you see these little, these buttons that are just this outline, they're going to be mainly in the top right. They're going to tell you what it is you're going to be editing, and they're always going to look the same. So filters, you click there, you're going to a configuration page. Under heat maps, you click coverage, you go there, you're going to an edit page. Under reports, headshot, you can go, that's the thing that most people care about editing here. You can go and you can edit the headshot. Social, you can go and update your word mark, or if you are a solo agent, it says layouts. But always to the top right, that's where you go when you want to edit something. Furthermore, well, once we had listings in place, that meant that this listing address needed to be at the top, and that needed to be consistent throughout. But if you're going to an agent, it's going to be the agent name that shows up throughout. And if you're in a market, same story. So when you go to the first one of any of these pages, you're going to be presented with a search box there. You know, wherever you are, up top, you're going to be able to search. Well, if you're going to have the search box here, then when you're here, it's only right that you can simply click here to easily, try to type your own name, to easily be able to search. That works throughout. You can easily jump between listings from any page. If you see that bold header that has a listing address, you know you can go and search for another listing address. If you're on a market page, any of the market pages, and you see that market name, you know you can search for any other market as well. Now, taking that further, there's this challenge of, well, what is the most relevant things that I can put in front of your face for whatever page you're on? What do you probably want to look at? And let's make sure that that's there. So for markets and for listings, you're going to start by seeing all of your recents, everything you've recently navigated to. And if you start a listing, it's going to be the first thing. So that stuff that you're hitting the most often is going to be boom, right in your face. Well, if you're doing that for listings, then it should be the same for markets. You should know what to expect whenever you go to a page. And of course, recents. If you're going to be able to see that snapshot of those first, it's 18, start and recents, you're going to want to be able to get at everything else you've done. So had to put that in place as well. And then lastly, what should you get if you start scrolling? Well, for markets, we already had that nailed. Didn't want to get rid of that. Just make it easy to scroll through and see a lot of the default markets that are available. For listings, well, that's a little different. You don't want to start scrolling and see all the listings that are available. It would never end. But what you're probably curious and want to be able to get at easily are your listings. have all your listings in place here, and there's a priority order. You're going to see all your active ones, then your pending ones, active, active under contract, pending, closed, and then we put the withdrawals and expireds at the end. And then with your buyers, you get to see a list of all of them as well. Putting this order in place, it's about having what agents care about closest to them. So that explains a bit around a lot of the UI updates, except for the biggie. Why mobile? Why mobile now? Well, agents are, like, this was no surprise going into building this. Agents do a whole lot from their car, a whole lot when they're out in the field. I was able to justify not having it mobile at launch because at the core market feature, something that you should probably be doing at your desk, preparing for a listing presentation, preparing to go on a property tour. But now that you can search by address, this inherently becomes something that you're going to want to use in the field. And so that's why I went so far as to completely audit the site to make sure everything worked on mobile today. All right, I'm at 12 minutes. That's the ins and outs of what got built. By the way, right now the code base is 60,000 lines of code, and it was 10,000 lines of code to do all of this, which is to say that this was all a huge endeavor, but it's also just the beginning. I see a ton of room for improvements here already, but I'm waiting for you to get your hands on it and to tell me what we should be doing. Thanks for being a part of this.